Everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be my January wrap-up. So basically talking about the books that I have read this month. I finished 11 books in January, which is a really good amount. I have to say, overall, quite a few disappointments, unfortunately. But February, since I've already announced my TBR, we know that there are going to be quite a few challenges. I'm very excited and hopeful that I will be finding more new favorites. With that said, I did find one new favorite, which is a nonfiction, so let's start with that one. So the best book that I finished this month was The Body by Bill Bryson, which is the same author as A Short Story of Nearly Everything, which I feel like everyone knows. It's a really famous nonfiction book if you want to get into, nonfiction science stuff. As you can guess from the title, this one is about the human body. I actually listened to it as an audiobook, which was great. The only thing is I wish I had the physical copy because I wish I had been able to put like post-its in some of those sections because some of the stuff you learn is super interesting and I feel like I will need to reread it. But yes, you go through the whole human body and you learn things about how they function, new things we've discovered, things we don't know yet. And I found it really, really interesting, little stories for every section of the body. So if you are someone that wants to learn more, it's very, very accessible. Like anyone can enjoy this book. And I definitely did. I gave it 5 stars. So definitely highly recommend that one. That was the best book that I've read this month so far. Month is done, so overall. I usually go through the books that I've read in the order that I've read them. Let me know if you prefer that way or the other. Let's go back to the original order. The first book I finished was 5 Feet Apart, which was part of one of my challenges for my Goodreads reading challenge, meaning that I had to read the winners in different categories of the Goodreads Choice Award. And this one was the winner for the YA Contemporary section. And I'm officially announcing that I'm not doing that ever again. I never enjoy them. It's not that I never enjoy YA Contemporaries, because I do. But I feel like very often the winners are just so not my cup of tea, including this one. This is the classic child being sick and, love story. I know there's like a bunch of controversy about if, the way CF is described in the book is well done or badly done. I can't tell. I don't know. I feel like at the end of the day, sometimes it will depend. Everyone will experience it differently. So I'm not going to review the book based on that. I'm just going to say that the romance was so unrealistic and the writing was kind of so-so. It felt quite short, and I'm assuming it's because this was written to become a movie, which you could really, really tell. So I overall really did not enjoy it, like really, really not. The only good thing was the fact that the audiobook was like 5 or 6 hours, so it was not long torture. But I adore the cover. I had thumbnail in my head. I love the cover. It's probably going to be the prettiest book that I read this year, but unfortunately this was a 1 star for me. Did not care for it whatsoever, but I can't really blame the book. I kind of already knew. That's why I'm officially not doing that ever again. The second book that I finished was The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, which I had been looking forward to reading this book forever. It's such a well-known fantasy series. She created a huge universe. I don't remember how many books, like 12, 16 books in that same universe, and the same character basically growing. And in the first book is a young teenager. And Assassin's Apprentice, you can kind of expect an assassin learning to become an assassin. This is the most chill, less action-driven assassin story I've ever read. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I did also go through this back and forth with the physical book and the audiobook, which actually I do have the physical book, so here it is, super pretty. I enjoy the characters. I am intrigued as to like where this is going, but I just expected it to be a bit more intense, I guess. It is so chill. Like it's I feel like I haven't read fantasy books like this in a real long time. And this one was actually published, was it in 95? Yeah, 95. Good memory. So maybe that's the reason why. I feel like growing up, I feel like I remember reading fantasy books that were this kind of slow-paced. So I don't know if that's my issue with it. Overall, I gave it 3 stars. I don't hate it. It's just that I thought I was going to adore this and I'm feeling a little about the whole thing. Still interested enough to finish it because I do have book 2 and 3 of this first trilogy on my shelf. So I will be reading them. I know that it's the first book and it's going to become much bigger. So I'm still very much hopeful, just not quite what I expected. But I feel like this is such a well-loved bow. Okay. Oh, and it took off Emily's bangs. Get them back. Oh my god, you really don't want to stay there. I feel like at this point, it's such a well-loved fantasy series that people have been like reading it and loving it for so long that maybe it's not as fresh in their memory. Like they remember loving it more than they would if they read it for the first time now. Maybe. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But yeah, I'm kind of... I just expected more. It's a classic reaction to books that are very hyped, right? After that, I had read The Body, which we've already talked about. And then I, luckily, was able to read the arc of Come Tumbling Down by Shauna Marie, which is the 5th book in the Wayward Children series, which is now out. Oh, I talked a little bit about it in a past video, but I'm a little torn about the whole series because you have 5 short stories. It's a world where children go through doors to a magical world, and then they sometimes come back and they struggle to fit in. The first book was good, then the second, third, I didn't really care for them, and then 4th was amazing. 4th can be read as a standalone, by the way. And then I was excited again to read number 5, which is related to book 2. You have to have read 1, 2, 3 to read the 5th one. And it's just about characters and the world I didn't really care for. With that said, I do like that there was a lot more action compared to the other books. Quite often in those short stories, because they are 200 pages, not a lot happens, and whenever something happens, you're told like, after, you know, they save people from the evil queen, and you're like, no, I wanted to see that. That's kind of what you finally get in this one. So if you enjoyed book 2, you will most likely enjoy this one. You do get some of the other characters from the other books in there too, which is nice, but yeah, in my head, number 4 is gonna always be the best one. I think I gave this, was it 3 stars? I think I gave it 3 stars. But I went into that one with pretty low expectations, so I can't say I was really disappointed. However, one that was a huge disappointment for me, Middle Game by Shauna Marie, same author. I was so happy that we were finally getting an adult, I guess, fantasy book by the same author, but a full-length one. This one is over 500 pages. So I was like, finally, we're going to get more. I love her writing, so I'm so curious to see how it's going to look like in a full-size novel. And, I did do the mistake of listening to it as an audiobook. I listened to a ton of audiobooks this month because I had no freaking time again. Hopefully things should start to calm down a little bit within the next month. But I went through it as an audiobook. Do not recommend you do that because for the first hour, the first characters you're encountering, the voices suck, like terrible. Like if you get a chance to listen to it, you're going to see what I mean. But yeah, after that it gets better until you go back to those characters. But you're essentially following 2 siblings called Rogers and Dodgers. I feel like right there you know that it's gonna not be great. Is it Rogers or just Roger? Yeah, Roger and Dodger. Close enough. And they are linked by basically, is it quantum entanglement? The magic power, the superpower, whatever, in the book are interesting. Everything else is incredibly vague and badly explained, and you just don't care about it. And the overall story was just kind of pointless, and I didn't really care about the characters that much. I just cared about the superpower for 500 pages. So I'm giving this 2 stars. I don't even know what to say about this book. It's just, what did I read? Like, why was it this long for no reason? And it was just like, it's like the author thought about this really cool superpower and then tried to build something around it, but there was nothing, you know? It's just that's the only interesting part. So huge disappointment for me. I'm very curious to hear what other people will think about it. If you have read it, please let me know. But I am just... You know what? Let's take a break of going through the same order that I've read them because I'm tired of complaining. Let's go with one that was actually good. I read, finally, book 5 in the Mistborn universe. This is Shadow of Self by Brandon Sanderson. Finally. It took me a while to continue. This is part of the 2nd series in the Mistborn world. This was supposed to be just one novella at first, right? One novel, but it became 4 books, and then he's going to come out with another trilogy and I think another one. And it's all in the same world, but like later on. So like the first Mistborn trilogy is like, would you say medieval time, kinda? And this one is like Western. And I am not a Western person. I do not care for those books. I do not care for those movies. But I did enjoy overall the first book in this new quartet because of the magical power. You didn't get much of the world yet, but the author is so good at just creating really interesting mysteries. Like there's like murders happening in these two dudes that are really cool. There's a lot of banter between them. It's funny. They just had to solve it, murder mystery. Pretty much the same thing in this one, I guess. But you finally get more of the world and magic. We're just going to keep it very vague because spoiler free, obviously. And that made me enjoy it a lot more, even though I still don't really care for Western. I give this 4 stars. It's really good. I'm not going to say much more because, again, I don't want to spoil anything, but you get some of the elements that were really good from the first trilogy in this second book. So I recommend continuing, even if you were a little on the fence. And I believe book 4 in that world is going to come out. Is it this year or next year? Anyway, I will read the 6th one. I don't know why I'm like putting an image when I do have the book. I did go back and forth with this one with the audiobook also. And yeah, overall I enjoy it. Not as good as the first Mistborn trilogy for me because, again, Western. And I don't feel like I care as deeply about the characters, but I do think they are light and funny, and it's just a little less dramatic, I guess, than the first trilogy. But yes, do recommend it, did like it, give it 5 stars. 4 stars. Going back to my disappointments. I read Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. This has been on my TBR for literally a year, like literally a year. I finally got to it as an audiobook, which I don't really recommend. The audiobook was fine, but I feel like the magic system gets a bit complex, the world building through audiobook. So I had to like make sure that whenever I was listening to it, I had like time and the energy to focus on it properly. With that said, my expectations were quite high because a lot of people were telling me that this was going to become a new favorite adult fantasy for me, that the magic system was similar to one created by Brandon Sanderson. And I do agree that the magic system is very interesting. I enjoyed it. There's like a talking key at one point, and there's some interesting bits. I don't feel like the world building is as interesting, again, if we continue the comparison. I didn't really care about the characters as much, except for the talking keywords again. When your favorite character is like a non-human thing, is always interesting. Overall, I found myself kind of struggling to finish. I am still very much intrigued. I do feel like book 2 will most likely be better, because I feel like this felt quite like, it's like setting up the story for book 2. Like you feel like there's so much more in the world that you're going to be able to finally discover. So I am very much hopeful. Book 2 is coming out beginning of this year, so I will definitely get to it as soon as possible to let you know if I think it's worth it or not. One thing that I wanted to mention, which bugged me when I read this, because I feel like I keep seeing this every single time I complain about it on Goodreads and Twitter, actually. If you don't follow me on either of those, I recommend you do so if you want to hear me complain. Just kidding, kind of. But there's a scene where the son looks at his mom and he thinks she was still beautiful, but she was also looking her age. And I don't know why I keep seeing these scenes where sons look at their mom and they're like, you know, she still look kind of hot, but you know, she's starting to get wrinkly and but kind of past her expiration date or something. What son does that? They're like really young too. They're like, what, 18 or I don't know in that book, but like in so many books I see that. I saw that also in like Throne of Glass, and I don't get it. I just don't. Whatever, doesn't really matter, but I just thought I would mention it because it bugs me, ageism. So yeah, I overall gave it a 3 stars. I'm intrigued, but I expected more. Finally, the weirdest book that I've read this month by far, The Need by Ellen Phillips. I don't remember if this is part of my Goodreads reading challenge or not, but it was in the horror category and a lot of people were talking about it, saying that it was kind of weird and quite short. So I was like, you know what? I can go through this quite fast. It was also as an audiobook, obviously. At first I was actually going to skip this one because you're literally following a mom and her 2 kids, and it seems like a domestic horror book, which I cannot read any more of those. But a lot of people were saying that there was like a sci-fi twist to it, and it was like quite interesting, and people were even comparing it to Behind Her Eyes, which I adore, a lot of people hate. So I decided, you know what? I'm gonna take the risk. And what did I just read? I have no idea what I read. Like, I read it, I was like, oh, okay. The ending was not satisfying, let's just say. There was some potential, but not great. Don't recommend it as an audiobook unless you want to hear kids say, money, 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 at least 50 times. And like hearing the narrator having to say that with that voice, I could not. Like, I could feel my uterus just shrivel up and die. So I don't know. I don't even know how to review this book because this was weird as hell. That's literally all I have to say. Finally, the last books that I've read during the last week of January was my reading challenge for the month. If you haven't seen it, I will link my vlog, which was a little bit late, but you know, story of my life. I have so many pre-filmed videos, but no time to edit them, which has been a struggle, but I think February will finally be the time I get it together, which I shouldn't say because that means it's not gonna happen. My challenge was to read a bunch of children classics that I've never read before, which I was really excited because middle grade is not my jam, but I had really high hopes because so many people like these classics, obviously, and I wanted to go through them and see for myself how I felt about them, and I was just excited, basically. The first one I finished was Charlotte's Web, which I enjoyed more than I thought I would. It did read like a children's book, but I thought there was some really cute, interesting lessons in here for children about friendship, for example. And I thought it was really cute. It was well written. Essentially a little pig that doesn't want to die and wants to live a long, happy life and make some friend. Just gonna keep it there for that one. Then I read Matilda, which I did go back and forth with the audiobook just because I was able to get it, and I did go through the book anyway just because you get the scenes, the cake scene, the little pictures in there, and this was great. I had seen the movie growing up, so I knew what the story was, but I had never read the book, and I was able to finally compare them, and I was pleasantly surprised that it was so much more like the movie than I expected, even the crazier scenes. I do feel like the only thing is that Miss Honey, which is like, she's what, 22, 23, definitely treats Matilda like an equal, and Matilda is like 5 or 6. But overall, I really did enjoy that one quite a bit too. And then finally, I read A Wrinkle in Time, which I had never seen the movie. I have yet to watch it, actually. And between the three, I think this is my least favorite, which is kind of strange because this one is fantasy. But you're following a weird kid with, well, weird kids, and they go and find their dad in kind of a parallel universe. It really is really, really weird for a kid's book. This one specifically, I thought was a great way to teach words, new words to children, because English is clearly not my first language, and I was impressed. Like, I felt like I had to like read slower than some of the other ones, even though these are still really well written. Because there are so many words that you don't expect in a children's book, which I find great. So yes, all three of them I enjoyed quite a bit. I finally needed some great books at the end of the month, right? But yeah, this was my reading month. A little bit everywhere, huh? I gave these two 5 and this one 4. So kind of disappointing month, but February is started and I'm excited to see how that's gonna go, because the challenges of reading a different genre for every week and having to try and vlog it, it's gonna be an interesting reading month for sure. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thumbs up, subscribe, let me know in the comment section what books you've read this month, what you thought about them, or if you have any opinion about the ones that I have read, because I would love to be able to chat about it. I will be putting more videos on the screen that I recommend you check out, and I will link my Goodreads in the comment section if you want to check it out, and I shall see you in my next video. Bye.